Hello and welcome. Happy Thursday, and welcome to joining us on this weekly live discussing the MBA application process. I know some of you are completing or finalizing or have already completed your round one application, so congratulations again to those who are on the final stages of round one submissions. I know you've worked really hard on those applications, and now it's the interview preparation process and then the waiting game. But there are some applicants that are going through this process and wondering about their reapplication strategy and how can they stand out. And today's discussion is specifically dedicated to those individuals who are reapplicants. However, if you're not a reapplicant, you can still learn quite a bit from this session in terms of how you make sure that you avoid these pitfalls to begin with, not having to think about the reapplication in the future. So as per usual, I have a couple of slides put together to anchor our discussion. I invite you to put in your questions in the comments. So we are on different platforms live on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. I believe those are the only four spaces we are live in today. So I am able to answer questions live, and if I'm going to be monitoring the comments so that I can, directly engage with those discussions. However, if you're watching this as a replay, you can always leave a comment and we'll get back to responding to those comments as well. If you want to know about our upcoming events, definitely subscribe to our channels to be notified when those events happen, or connect with us on our various platforms. Excellent. So why don't we get started with today's presentation? I will jump right in. I have a few areas that I want to really talk about, and I think it's always really important to understand sort of the reasoning behind things, behind recommendations, and then we'll dive into the mistakes that I most often see in reapplicants' strategy. And what are some things that you can then, of course, take into account in terms of making sure that you are not making those same mistakes yourself, because you are, of course, watching our channel. So let's dive right in. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about why strong applicants are rejected. You see this online. You see this in forums. If you read Reddit or Fishbowl or any one of those platforms where there's a community of individuals talking about the MBA journey and their experiences and their wins and losses. And sometimes you see applicant stories where you see ridiculously high test scores, strong GMAT, and they share the news that they were rejected. And you then start wondering, well, if these applicants are so strong and they still couldn't make it through, how will I be able to make it through? And there are also stories of individuals who have really poor academics or really poor test scores and are able to succeed. So there is something in the entire application that is making one win and the other lose. And it's important then to understand that it's not a black and white decision from the admission team's perspective. This is about, who are they going to accept? How is the class going to be shaped? That will benefit most everyone, right? So some of those reasons where strong applicants are rejected is that lack of differentiation. So you will have individuals who are consultants, investment bankers, where the entire application is somewhat vanilla in terms of every consultant or every investment banker would have a very similar narrative. They didn't take the time to really demonstrate their differentiating factors in their application. And that's where you would see those losses. Also, the poor culture fit. If you are not thinking about your audience, and in your case, the audience here is the admission team, when you are presenting your candidacy and putting together the collage of your experiences, then that is a huge mistake, because you are not saying how you belong there, right? You have to make that component clear. And oftentimes, it's really the career goals that breaks the application success. So admission teams are looking for, of course, ambitious applicants who are going to essentially be the next generation of leaders who are shaping the business world. However, they also want to know that you as an applicant have thought about what that career journey is going to look like. So if you are coming in with very vague or multi-layered goals, that to the admission team is very complex. And from their perspective, they won't be able to see how the school will be able to help you, or they will feel that your goals are not entirely clear. Then, if you are, for example, really ambitious and don't understand the market well. So I always talk about, individuals who have no investment banking experience or no M&A experience wanting to go into private equity. The probability of that is very low, right? So you pitching something like that to the admission team indicates to them that you don't really understand the market enough to know how difficult that is. And from their perspective, they don't see enough evidence to support that goal. Therefore, they will say no to you, even if you have a really strong application. So that's really important to remember, because I see oftentimes applicants being fixated on my GMAT score or my GRE score is going to make or break my application. And it's really a combination of different components, and goals is a very important piece of that process. Now, next week, I'm going to talk about goals. So if you want to talk about how you can make sure that your goals are in alignment, definitely join next week's session to talk about that, or to learn about that. So now, as a reapplicant, you must think about what did you do last year and what do you need to do this year. And you must remember that last year, or whenever you applied previously, the approach may have not been exactly what you needed in terms of showcasing your candidacy, and therefore you can't use the same process. So you need a reapplication strategy to make sure that you have a different outcome this time around. And the strategy is really important because it allows you to really take the time to be reflective and show growth and self-awareness, be able to differentiate yourself from the next person who has a similar profile to you. It shows also commitment and resilience. Being rejected is very hard, very difficult. And no matter how many times people tell you don't take it personal, because it's not personal, and it's not, but we are human beings and we care about being accepted, right? We care about being accepted into groups we want to be a part of. So you can't help but take it personally. So, having a strategy is going to be really important to showcase that to admission team, that you are really committed to this journey, you're committed to this path, and you have the resilience to, in face of rejection, still push through and still demonstrate and still work through all the things that you need to work through to get on the other side. And obviously, a strategy is really important, because without one, you may end up repeating the same mistakes that you made the first time around or the second time around, because there are applicants out there who apply multiple years on this journey. So what are some of the mistakes that applicants make? First and foremost, applicants think that because they wrote their application last time in a certain way with certain experiences, they can't make changes, and therefore they fail to address any of the past weaknesses, right? So not taking the time to really address the past weaknesses can really be a detrimental component, a detrimental element to your application. If you don't show improved test scores, if you don't show professional growth, if you don't show engagement in your community, well, those are all indicative of someone who is just applying to reapply or reapplying to reapply, but not necessarily taking the necessary, taking the step to have a really difficult conversation with themselves to understand where their weaknesses are, right? So the way that you can turn this around, if you haven't done so already, is to look at your application from a critical perspective, not in a way that you're going to, break your spirit, but rather in a way that says, where are areas that I haven't done so well in my last application, right? Where did my last application fall short? And then, of course, that is your indication to make sure that you are taking the steps to make sure that you're taking the steps to do the things you need to do in order to improve your application this next time around, right? So you're going to highlight your actions rather that you've taken since you last applied. So if you've gained new skills, if you've taken new courses, if you have a new job or a promotion, these are the things that you need to focus on during that in between period, between the last application and the next application timeline that you are applying to. I see there's a comment, so I'm just going to take a moment to read it and address it. So, so the question, I'm not going to say the name because this is going to be recorded and it stays online, but I will just address the comment. So is it not unfair that strong applicant is rejected, whereas comparatively poor candidates is accepted only because they're not able to articulate clearly their goals? Well, this is unfortunately the world we live in, right? The schools that I am focused on are top 20 schools, and they have a lot of applicants to go through. A part of the process is to do the self-reflection, right? And from the admissions perspective, they will look at the candidate's application from the angle of, this is your best work, right? If you have taken the time and taken this process seriously, and you haven't been able to articulate your goals effectively, well, how are you going to perform on a day-to-day basis in class? How are you going to show up in front of our employers in the future and be able to represent us, the institution, to those companies, right? So it's a multi-layer element in terms of like how they're looking at those candidates, but it's really important that applicants really take the time to reflect on the goals. So if the goals are difficult for the applicant, whether it's for you or someone else in this in our community, that means you just need time, and sometimes you also need external support, whether that's your counselors, in school if you're in university, or career coaches, if you are a professional. Some companies do have career advisors within the organization, so you must leverage all those resources in order to help you define your goals. And then obviously the refining and clarification is part of the process, right? If you're a business leader, and you do have to think that the admission team is looking at every applicant as potential future, CEO of a Fortune 500 company. If you can't articulate your goals, then how are you going to be a leader, right? That's kind of the question that we are left asking, right, of applicants in the application process. So it can be unfair, absolutely. And sometimes people are better in person than not, and that's why there's an interview element as well to the application process. But communication is foundational to a leader, and that's obviously something that they evaluate in candidates, both in written and verbal as well. Okay, so let's continue. I think I covered this slide. Excellent question, by the way. So thank you for asking it. So the next mistake that applicants make is reusing the same essays. sometimes, I mean, of course, you've put in a lot of effort in your last application, right? You put in, your soul into your applications, but now it's the time to reapply. And some schools don't offer you a lot of space for as a reapplicant in terms of things that you can resubmit, but there are schools that do require you to resubmit an application, right? In essays, all the essays, or there is an additional reapplicant essay that is required. And aside from the reapplicant that you wouldn't have necessarily included it the first time around, it also means that your entire application, to the extent that you can, and that you have the optionality, that you should resubmit. Reflect on all the experiences that you have, revise, obviously, fresh perspective, fresh examples that demonstrate that you are a strong candidate for the school. This is a way that you can also highlight the weaknesses that you had in your previous application. So it's really important that you are taking the opportunity as a reapplicant to redo everything. And I know this is a lot of work, absolutely. But if you want a different outcome, you can't follow the same process as the first time around. That didn't yield the results that you wanted, right? And of course, you're going to tailor your essay to show a deeper self-awareness, right? If you know what are some of the areas, even if you don't know specifically, you will know some of the areas that you were not strong at, right? Like I worked with a candidate who the first time around when the applicant had applied on their own, had a really unstructured, very difficult to read resume. And that was the first thing I saw in the applicants in the journey. And I quickly realized why they were rejected to 8 schools, although they had 780 GMAT in the classic edition, and 5 promotions, right? It is the communication component that's really important. So now the self-awareness comes into play in that particular example, is to say, okay, well, if I haven't communicated effectively last time, how can I communicate better this time? And this is then taking that deep self-reflection and having the self-awareness that that's a weakness that you need to address in the next application cycle. Okay, so I think I lost count. I think it's number 3. The third mistake that applicants make that you should avoid, or reapplicants make that you should avoid, is overlooking new achievements. So like I mentioned earlier, the time between your last application and when you are reapplying should be a time of development, right? You need to understand where your weaknesses were the previous application cycle, and then make sure that you're taking actionable steps to showcase the achievements. Sometimes applicants are not really taking the time to actually even reflect on what their job has been, especially if you haven't changed jobs or gotten a promotion. It's like, I've been doing similar things that I've done last year. Now it's time to actually go deeper into those experiences and reflect on what your accomplishments have been, and incorporate those into your application, into your reapplication. And then you want to then demonstrate how this new experiences or refined experiences or deeper dives into your experiences are stronger connected to your goals. Oftentimes the issue is that the admission team does not see the correlation between your past and your future. Therefore, the examples and the authenticity and the deep dives into your experiences are where the applicant's reflection is needed. And obviously the development of those essays, resumes, letters of recommendation, and all those pieces come into play. Okay. The fourth, I guess, mistake that reapplicants make is ignoring feedback. Sometimes I see that, applicants struggle, and it's normal to struggle, right? This process. Most people are not serial applicants in terms of like keep on applying and presenting themselves effectively on an external platform, and the idea of going through this process, it's challenging in and of itself, but then doing even more work that you did previously, it's not always very appealing, to do. However, it's not about working more, but it's rather working more effectively, in terms of recognizing where your shortcomings lied, and then obviously taking specific actionable steps to make sure that those are communicated better, the next time around. Sometimes for some schools, there is an opportunity to discuss the reasons and how you can improve the next application cycle. But then for other schools, you have to really guess what the reason was. You're not informed what the reason was that you were rejected the first time around. But this is where mentors, admission coaches, and individuals like those who are professionals, know the space, know what schools are looking for, can be really helpful on understanding what your shortcomings were the first time around, and then obviously help you build a strategy around how you can make the next application better, right? So just because you were rejected, this is a great opportunity to say, I can't do it myself, or I chose the wrong person to support me last time around. I need to refresh perspective on how can I make my application better. And remember, this is all about you in terms of your journey and where you want to go. No one succeeds on their own. Everyone needs a community of people to support them along the lines of going to where you need to go, and finding the right people for you is going to be really important. And that doesn't mean that, the one person that worked for someone else works for you and vice versa, right? So just be mindful of finding the right person that can support your needs is critical in this process. Then we have, lacking that reapplication strategy. So oftentimes I see that applicants, when they apply the first time around, they've learned the process of you have to do A, B, C, and then continue down the line. However, there are times where applicants see that as, I know the process, therefore I don't need to do anything differently. I'm just gonna, write new essays. That is oftentimes a big mistake on the applicant's perspective. You need to have a reapplication strategy with specific actionable steps, with specific discussion on every single application that you applied the previous cycle, especially the ones that you are reapplying to, and make sure that you have concrete strategies, concrete action items that you're going to take between that period and the next period. And obviously, you will then need to have a targeted reapplication plan. What are the things that you need to do differently for every segment, every step of the way, right? And obviously, you clearly articulate your why. And why do you still persist on getting an MBA? It's really an important component to be able to communicate that to the admission team, and showing why you're now better prepared than you were last application cycle, to showcase that you are someone who can, contribute better to the community in the MBA program, this time around, but also be a more thoughtful leader, someone who can have greater impact in the future that you are looking to build. So I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to see what questions you guys have. Please write questions in the comments, and I'm going to stop sharing screens. If you would like to discuss our approach here at SIA and how we can support your application, reapplication, please reach out. We do have free consultations to discuss what your needs are and our services, and see if there is a good match between the two. So let me stop sharing screens and move things around a little bit. All right, so let's go with questions that have come in from the registration. Okay, so the first question is, how can I effectively know why I wasn't admitted last time so I can improve this year's application? This is an excellent question. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily know that someone, you may not necessarily know why you were rejected the first time around. However, there is a community of people who all they do is talk about, the MBA journey. People like myself, individuals in the admission community where you can talk about, where you can have conversations and discuss your application and get a variety of different perspectives around, what are some of those pitfalls. And then obviously, those perspectives can help you get a sense around why you were rejected the first time around. And then obviously if you choose to work with a coach, that coach would be able to guide you in more details, like read your last year's application, see where those, and identify specific areas that could have led to your rejection, and then obviously build a strategic plan around how you're going to address those in the new cycle. Should I get a new recommender this year, or is it better to use the same one from last year with an updated perspective? It depends on who you used the previous year. In the application process, there's like elements that you need to complete, but the approaches are, individual in terms of, it's not a black and white, you should do this or that. If the last year's recommender that you used is someone you continue to work with, has new ideas or new experiences to showcase in the letters of recommendation, is a supervisor who can really illustrate your commitment and your contributions, then yes, use the same person, just an updated letter of recommendation. However, if the person that you're looking to use, you haven't worked with, for a while, they have known you, like you've given your best commentary in your last letter recommendation, then you will need a new person to choose. Excellent. So my GMAT score hasn't improved significantly. Should I address this or focus more on other aspects of my profile? You absolutely must address it. The GMAT or the GRE is a really important component of the application process, and it must be addressed. Now, if you haven't retaken the GMAT, if your GMAT was an element of your potential rejection, then not retaking it can be a question mark, can leave a question mark for the admission team, as in, why did you think that your previous score was good enough to get you to Wharton, right? So you should have taken it again. However, if your score was relatively strong, then focus on the other aspects of your profile. It's no need to retake a test if you already were above average or average or above average, depending on where you kind of fall in the category of applicants. Then there's no need to retake, but to focus on the other pieces of your application. All right, we're going to do last question. So should I tweak my post-MBA goals, or is consistency more important when reapplying? I get this question a lot. Actually, as a re-applicant, it is really important to make sure that your goals were not a reason you were rejected. If they are if it's not the reason you were rejected and it's still in alignment with what you want to do, then making final tweaks, it's okay. However, oftentimes what I see is goals that are not realistic in terms of business school. So a rewrite of the goals when reapplying is going to be important. But then there is also an element in here that does require a reflection as to why those goals were changed, right? So you will need to take into account the two component of, is my goal still in alignment? Was the goal the reason why I was rejected? And then if I need to change the goals entirely, what do I need to do? How do I need to explain those in my reapplication essay? Excellent. So I really enjoyed this talk today. Hopefully you found it helpful. Next week, we're going to talk about the MBA goals. So I invite you to join on Thursday at 10 a.m. live. If you can't join live, I recommend that you register for the event and ask your question in the registration form. So this way we get to answer it live. And then you can watch the replay when it's a more convenient time for you. If this information was helpful for you, give it a thumbs up. And I look forward to seeing you next time in next week's discussion on goals. Until then.